The low hum of the engines blended with the soft murmur of passengers settling in for the long flight. I had chosen a window seat in row 19, hoping for a few hours of quiet before the exhaustion of travel set in. My neck had already started to ache, that familiar, grinding stiffness that always came after sitting too long. I adjusted the gray neck pillow around me, pressing it into the tender spot just below my jaw. It wasn't much, but it was the only thing that made flights bearable. For a moment, I thought I might actually drift off. The air was cool, the lights dimmed, and the world outside the oval window blurred into a soft horizon of clouds. But then, like a thunderclap in a library, came the voice. "Are you kidding me? You call this legroom?" Every head in the nearby rows turned. The voice belonged to a heavy-set woman standing in the aisle, wearing a bright floral dress that shimmered under the overhead light. Her blonde hair was pinned awkwardly, and her tone carried the shrill edge of someone used to complaining and being obeyed. The flight attendant tried to soothe her. "Ma'am, if you could please take your seat." "I will, when I get the one I paid for," the woman snapped. "I'm not sitting in the middle, like some sardine." She glanced around, scanning the cabin as if daring someone to challenge her. My eyes darted to the boarding pass in her hand. Seat 19B. My row. I sighed quietly, knowing my brief moment of peace was about to vanish. She thudded into the middle seat beside me, the floral pattern of her dress pressing against the narrow armrest. Without so much as a glance, she reached up to the air vent and twisted it sharply toward herself. Then, finally, her gaze dropped to my neck pillow. "You know," she said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness, "I could really use one of those. My back's been killing me." I turned slightly, offering a polite smile. "Yeah, they make a difference on long flights." She nodded slowly, still staring at it. "So you gonna share?" I blinked, thinking she was joking. "Excuse me. You don't really need it the whole time, do you?" Her tone hardened. "I didn't get one, and I have terrible back issues. The least you could do is let someone else use it for a bit." I kept my voice steady. "I'm sorry, but I actually do need it. I get neck pain during long flights." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. Everyone gets a little sore. Don't be dramatic." I turned back toward the window, trying not to engage further. A few seconds of silence passed before she muttered under her breath, just loud enough to be heard. "Unbelievable. People these days, so selfish." A few passengers glanced our way. I caught the flight attendant's cautious look from down the aisle. She must have sensed the tension because she approached with a calm smile. "Everything all right here?" I nodded quickly. "All good." The woman, Tasha, as I later heard her called, huffed and looked away. "Sure, everything's fine. I was just saying some people don't know how to share." The attendant's smile didn't falter, but her eyes warned Tasha gently. "We just need everyone calm before takeoff, ma'am." Tasha mumbled something about rude men and dug her phone out of her bag. I thought that would be the end of it, but halfway through the flight, I realized how wrong I was. When the drink cart arrived, she ordered a soda, extra ice, and 2 packets of pretzels. She barely waited for the attendant to move before turning toward me again. "Still comfy with your little pillow?" I kept my focus on the screen in front of me, pretending to watch the in-flight map. "Yup. You know," she said, "I read that it's bad for circulation. Maybe you're making your pain worse." "I'll take my chances." She snorted. "Suit yourself." A few minutes passed in silence. The cabin lights dimmed further, and the sound of soft movie audio filled the air. I closed my eyes, hoping fatigue would win. But then came the bump. A hard, sudden jolt of turbulence. The drink in my cup holder sloshed dangerously close to the rim. Tasha gasped, grabbing the armrest, and spilling half her soda on her tray. "Great. Just great," she barked. "This is why I can't get comfortable. I need that pillow now." I opened my eyes, staring at her. "What?" She gestured toward my neck. "You heard me. You're not even sleeping. Just hand it over." "Ma'am," I said, keeping my tone level, "this is my pillow. I'm using it. Please stop asking." That was it. The thin layer of politeness between us snapped. She leaned closer, her voice rising above the engine noise. "You think you're better than me? Huh? Just because you boarded early and got your little window seat and your fancy pillow. I could feel the heat of her anger. People were starting to look again. The flight attendant down the aisle froze mid-step, uncertain whether to intervene. I spoke quietly, hoping to defuse her. No one's better than anyone. I just don't want to argue. Please, let's keep this civil. She smiled, a twisted, mocking smile, and picked up her cup. Oh, I'll keep it civil, all right. Before I could react, cold liquid exploded across my face. The shock hit me like a slap. Sticky soda ran down my cheek into my collar, dripping onto my lap. The sharp scent of cola filled my nose. For a moment, I couldn't even move. Gasps echoed through the cabin. The man across the aisle froze mid-bite of his sandwich. Someone whispered, "Did she just?" The flight attendant rushed over, her tray trembling slightly in her hands. "Ma'am, what did you just do?" Tasha sat back, feigning innocence. "It was an accident." The plane shook. I wiped my face with a napkin, blinking through the sting. My voice came out low and calm, though my heart was pounding. "The plane didn't shake, ma'am. You threw it." The attendant looked between us, unsure, while passengers murmured in disbelief. The man across the aisle raised his phone. "I got that on video," he said firmly. For the first time, Tasha's confidence wavered. She shot him a glare. "You mind your own business." The attendant took a deep breath. "Sir, are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said, though my shirt clung to me, sticky and cold. But this woman just assaulted me. That word, assault, hung in the air. The cabin fell silent except for the low drone of the engines. Tasha crossed her arms, muttering, "Oh, grow up. It's just a drink." I looked at her and spoke evenly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Then you won't mind explaining that to airline security when we land." Her expression faltered, the fake smugness slipping just for a moment. Around us, eyes stayed locked on her, some recording, some simply waiting for what would happen next. The flight attendant straightened and spoke into her earpiece, voice steady. "Captain, we have a disturbance in row 19. Passenger misconduct confirmed." Tasha leaned back in her seat, suddenly quiet. The air around us felt heavier, charged with unspoken tension. I turned back toward the window, sticky soda drying on my skin, heart still hammering. That was the moment I decided. Whatever it took, this woman wasn't walking off this plane without consequences. The flight attendant returned a few minutes later with a small stack of tissues and a damp cloth. Her expression caught somewhere between apology and disbelief. I took them without a word, dabbing the soda from my face and shirt. The sticky sweetness clung to my skin, and I could feel eyes still on me from every direction. The hum of the engines filled the silence that followed, but beneath it I could sense the quiet tension, the kind that thickens when everyone knows something serious just happened, but no one wants to be the next to speak. Tasha sat stiffly in her seat, arms crossed, pretending to scroll through her phone. Her jaw tightened every time someone glanced her way. The flight attendant bent down beside me, whispering, "Sir, I've informed the captain. He's asked that we monitor the situation until we land. Are you all right to continue?" I nodded. "I'll manage. Just make sure this doesn't get brushed off." She met my eyes, and something in my tone must have convinced her this wasn't an overreaction. "It won't be," she promised quietly before moving on. Tasha snorted under her breath. "You act like I threw acid at you." "It was soda. You're fine." I turned to her, keeping my voice level. "You deliberately threw it at me because I wouldn't give you my pillow. That's not fine." She didn't respond this time. Instead, she shifted her gaze toward the window, jaw tight, the smugness gone but the defiance still there. I could almost feel the gears turning in her head, how to spin this, how to make herself the victim. Across the aisle, the man who had filmed everything leaned slightly over. "Hey," he said in a low voice, "I got the whole thing. You'll want this later." He angled his phone toward me, showing the clip. Tasha yelling, the soda flying, me flinching as it hit. The sound of gasps and the flight attendant's shocked face were all captured. "Thank you," I said, meaning it. "No problem," he replied. "People like her get away with this stuff too often." I could hear a faint tremor in his tone, anger on my behalf. It gave me a sense of quiet reassurance. I wasn't imagining how wrong this was. The cabin itself seemed to share that sentiment. Whispered conversations passed like small waves, passengers murmuring words like crazy and unbelievable. Still, I sat motionless, forcing myself to breathe slowly. The worst thing I could do now was lose my temper. Tasha wanted that, some outburst she could twist against me. So I stayed silent, my calm a wall she couldn't climb. About 20 minutes later, the flight attendant returned with her supervisor, a tall man with calm eyes and the kind of professional restraint that comes from years of dealing with chaos at 30,000 feet. He crouched beside my seat. "Sir, I've reviewed what happened. We'll be filing a formal incident report. We'll also have security meet the flight on arrival." Tasha's head snapped toward him. "Security? For what? I told you it was an accident." He stood slowly, his tone measured. "Ma'am, multiple passengers witnessed what happened. The captain has been informed. Please remain calm and in your seat." She threw up her hands. "This is ridiculous. He's milking it for attention." Her voice rose again, drawing glances from across the cabin. The supervisor didn't flinch. "Ma'am, that's enough. If you continue to raise your voice, we will have to restrain you for the remainder of the flight." The threat of restraint silenced her faster than anything else could have. She pressed her lips together and turned away, muttering to herself. I leaned slightly back, whispering to the attendant as he prepared to walk away. "You'll keep the video as part of the report?" "Yes," he said. "We'll ask the witness for a copy once we're on the ground. I can assure you, sir, this won't go ignored." That assurance gave me a strange mix of satisfaction and caution. People said things like that all the time, promises that vanished once the plane doors opened. But I could tell from his tone this wasn't one of those times. The rest of the flight unfolded under an uneasy quiet. Tasha avoided looking at anyone. Every so often, she'd mumble something about overreacting or cancel culture, but no one responded. The attendants made a point to pass her row quickly, pausing only to check on me with brief nods of concern. I leaned my head against the seat, neck aching worse than before, both from the tension and the awkward posture. My pillow felt heavier now, a symbol of everything that had just gone wrong, and everything I wasn't going to let her get away with. Half an hour before landing, the captain's voice came over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our descent, please remain seated with your seat belts fastened." His calm, authoritative tone filled the cabin, but behind it, I sensed something else: preparation. They were ready for the situation waiting below. The man across the aisle caught my eye and gave a small, knowing nod. I returned it. In silence, we had formed an unspoken alliance, ordinary passengers standing together against entitled chaos. The plane tilted downward, engines roaring softly as the city lights appeared far below. My heart began to thump faster, not from fear, but from anticipation. Justice was finally close. Tasha's breathing quickened. She fiddled with her phone, then jabbed at the call button above her head. The supervisor returned almost immediately. "When we land," she began, forcing a smile, "I'd like to file a complaint against this man. He's been harassing me the whole flight." The supervisor didn't even blink. "Ma'am, you can speak with security after they speak with him. You'll both have a chance to give statements." Her smile faltered. "After they speak with him?" "That's correct." He turned away before she could respond. I couldn't help the faint smirk tugging at the corner of my mouth. Her attempts to rewrite the story were crumbling faster than she could rebuild them. The final few minutes before landing stretched like an hour. Every small movement, the click of the landing gear, the rattle of trays, the muffled cough of a nearby passenger, seemed sharper. My nerves buzzed. When the tires finally screeched against the runway, a collective exhale swept through the cabin. As we taxied toward the gate, the supervisor returned once more. His calm voice carried enough weight that everyone in nearby rows listened. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated until the seatbelt sign is turned off. For those in row 19, please stay seated after arrival. Security will be boarding." Tasha stiffened. "Excuse me? You can't make me stay here. I have a connecting flight." He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped aside, letting the tension do the talking. I sat motionless, hands clasped, heartbeat steady now. The adrenaline had shifted from anger to focus. I wanted this handled properly. No shouting, no revenge-born rage, just truth, evidence, and consequence. Tasha turned to me suddenly, her tone soft, almost pleading. Look, maybe I overreacted. We can just forget this, right? No need to get people involved. Her sudden humility almost made me laugh. You should have thought of that before throwing your drink. The cabin lights flickered to full brightness, illuminating her face. The bravado was gone, replaced by unease. For the first time, she seemed small, trapped. Outside the window, I could see the airport lights flashing in long rows as we slowed to a stop. The engines began to wind down, replaced by the faint clatter of passengers reaching for their bags. Then the chime sounded. The seatbelt sign turned off. Half the passengers stood immediately, but no one near us moved. Every eye in the surrounding rows stayed fixed on Tasha. The flight attendants formed a subtle barrier at both ends of the aisle. She exhaled shakily. You really think they'll believe you? I looked straight ahead. I don't need them to believe me. I have the truth, and about 6 witnesses who recorded it. The color drained from her face. Footsteps approached from the front cabin, deliberate and heavy. I didn't turn, but I could already picture the uniforms, the clipped voices, the calm authority. My pulse slowed, steady, controlled. Justice was boarding the plane, and Tasha knew it. The cabin doors opened with a sharp hiss that cut through the thick silence. The first uniformed officer stepped aboard, flanked by 2 airport security agents. Their expressions were calm but unmistakably firm, faces that had seen more than their share of Midair tantrums and entitled passengers. The lead officer scanned the rows, and when his gaze landed on us, he gave a small nod to the flight supervisor, who motioned toward Tasha's seat. "Ma'am, please stay seated for the moment," the officer said, his voice low but commanding. "We need to have a quick word with you before deboarding." Tasha's voice came out high and shaky. "I already told them it was an accident." "He's lying." The officer raised a hand. "We'll hear your side shortly. For now, please remain calm." The passengers who had lingered in nearby rows tried not to stare, but their curiosity betrayed them. Some angled their phones subtly, others just watched with quiet satisfaction. It wasn't every day you saw karma served this neatly. I sat still, saying nothing, my heart pounding a quiet rhythm against my chest. The same man who had recorded earlier stepped forward from his seat and spoke up before anyone could stop him. "Officer, I have video proof of what happened." She threw her drink in his face because he wouldn't give her his neck pillow. Tasha's head whipped toward him, eyes wide. "You can't show that. That's invasion of privacy." The officer met her gaze steadily. "Ma'am, this evidence will help us determine the truth. If you've done nothing wrong, you have nothing to worry about." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The man handed over his phone, and the officer glanced at the short clip. It didn't take long, just a few seconds of her yelling, the splash, my stunned expression, and the gasps around us. That was all the proof anyone needed. "Thank you, sir," the officer said, handing back the phone. He turned to Tasha. "Please gather your belongings. You'll need to come with us for questioning." Her composure shattered. "You can't be serious. I paid for this flight. I have rights." "Yes, ma'am," he replied evenly. "And those rights don't include assaulting another passenger." The entire cabin fell into absolute silence. You could have heard a pin drop, or, in this case, the faint rustle of her floral scarf as she snatched it from her bag and stuffed it angrily into her purse. Her movements were jerky, defiant. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just watched as she tried to salvage the last fragments of control she didn't have. There was something pitiful about it, like watching a storm realize it had already passed. As the officers escorted her off the plane, whispers rippled through the cabin. Someone muttered, "Good riddance." Another said, "About time." I caught fragments of sympathy, some directed toward me, some toward the attendants who had endured her tirade. When she disappeared beyond the jet bridge, a wave of quiet relief washed over the cabin. The tension that had hung heavy for hours seemed to lift all at once. The supervisor approached me one last time, clipboard in hand. "Sir, I'll need you to come with us too, just to provide your statement for the record." "Of course," I said, rising from my seat. My neck throbbed from the stiffness, a dull reminder of how this all began, with something as simple as a pillow meant to ease pain, not start a war. We exited the plane together, stepping into the jet bridge. The air felt different, cooler, heavier with the smell of recycled airport oxygen. Down the corridor, I caught a glimpse of Tasha, surrounded by officers. Her hands weren't cuffed, but her posture was rigid, defensive. Inside the small airport office, they offered me a chair and a bottle of water. I recounted the story in calm, precise detail, how she demanded the pillow, how she grew aggressive, how she threw the drink when I refused. The officer took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly just listened. When I finished, he nodded. "We'll be submitting this along with the video and the flight crew's reports. I can tell you now, sir, this incident meets the criteria for a permanent ban from the airline." I blinked. "You mean she won't be able to fly with them again?" "That's correct," he said, matter of fact. "Physical aggression against another passenger is a serious violation. The airline will issue the ban once our investigation is logged." A strange mix of emotions hit me at once. Satisfaction, yes, but also disbelief. I hadn't expected justice to come so cleanly, so fast. Tasha, sitting a few chairs away, overheard the last line. Her face twisted with fury. "You can't do that." "I didn't even mean to." The officer turned toward her. "Ma'am, we have multiple witnesses and a clear recording. The decision isn't yours to make." She sank back into her seat, eyes glassy with frustration. "It's just a stupid pillow," she muttered under her breath. I looked at her, finally allowing myself to speak. "No, it's about respect. Something you clearly thought didn't apply to anyone but you." Her glare could have burned through steel, but for once, it didn't matter. The power she'd wielded through volume and arrogance was gone. After a few final signatures, I was free to go. As I walked toward the baggage claim, the weight that had pressed on my chest since takeoff began to ease. The echo of the confrontation still rang faintly in my head, the shouting, the splash of soda, the stunned silence. But it was fading now, being replaced by something quieter. Resolution. Outside the arrival gate, a few of the same passengers approached me. The man with the recording offered a handshake. "Glad you stood your ground." Most people would have just given in. "Thanks," I said, shaking his hand. "I almost did, honestly, but I've dealt with neck pain for years. That pillow isn't luxury, it's relief." "Doesn't matter," he replied. "You shouldn't have to justify not giving in to bullies." I nodded. He was right. For too long, people like Tasha had thrived on the idea that everyone else would stay quiet just to avoid conflict. But silence only fed entitlement. As I stepped into the terminal, the crowd's buzz returned to normal. Families reuniting, travelers rushing to connections, voices rising and fading in waves. The chaos of ordinary life. It grounded me. My phone buzzed. A notification from the airline appeared. "We sincerely apologize for your in-flight experience. A customer service representative will contact you within 24 hours regarding compensation and the official report." I exhaled a soft laugh. It wasn't about the money or the apology, though both were nice gestures. It was about the principle that even in a confined space thousands of feet in the air, decency still had boundaries, and those who crossed them faced consequences. Hours later, as I sat in a quiet cafe near the airport, I replayed everything in my mind. The hum of conversation around me faded into background noise. I thought of Tasha again, not with anger, but with a strange curiosity. Would she ever realize that this wasn't about humiliation but accountability? Probably not. Some people never see themselves as the villain of their own story. My neck still ached faintly, but I leaned back, resting the pillow gently against it. The familiar pressure brought comfort. Maybe that was the real victory, not the ban, not the report, but reclaiming a small piece of peace she tried to take away. Through the cafe window, I watched planes gliding into the night sky, silent silhouettes vanishing into the clouds. A reminder that journeys often end where new ones quietly begin. Somewhere out there, another flight would soon take off, another cabin filling with strangers. And I wondered just for a moment if someone else would face their own version of Tasha, a test of patience, dignity, and restraint. The thought lingered as I took a slow sip of coffee, the bitter warmth spreading through me. The world was full of Karens in different forms, but maybe, just maybe, it was also full of people ready to stand up to them. Outside, another plane lifted into the darkness. Its lights flickered against the clouds, distant, fading, but certain. Just like the memory of what happened. I smiled faintly, not out of triumph, but closure. Justice had taken flight. And for once, it had landed exactly where it belonged.